Okay, so well done for showing up. Tonight we're going to explore the relationship, if any, no assumptions made here, between vulnerability and Aikido. It's not an obvious link for me, but I think it's an interesting one to explore. So what do you think we mean when we talk about vulnerability? We got some definitions that you'd like to bring to the fore? No,
we are fragility, how fragile we are.
Yeah, that's when you look at definitions for it. I have to say I don't really like them, but here's one: is the quality of being easily hurt or attacked. The state of being vulnerable or exposed. I prefer that. I think when we're talking about vulnerability, it's about being willing to expose yourself to danger and being hurt. And that's where I think the link between Aikido and vulnerability can be made. Because when we are facing our partner, the person who's got the sword in their hand, the cocked fist, they're going to grab our wrist, they're going to push us or whatever, we're exposing ourselves to that possibility that we might get hurt. We don't run away. We don't try and preempt it. We actually open up to it. Is that fair?
Yeah, that seems fair.
Yeah.
Quentin, you're talking about within the dojo. Is that what the focus of the conversation is about?
Hugh, this is me you're talking to, so absolutely not.
Just confirming that you're the same person that we've been meeting in the last year. Okay. So what I was just going to add that there's a lot of scientific evidence, actually. I mean, call it scientific of posture and how people who get attacked in the street are identified instinctively through poor posture and vulnerable posture. So maybe that's your link with the off the mat and on the mat. Yeah.
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no, because I think if we adopted that poor posture on the mat, we probably wouldn't be very good at receiving it and dealing with it. We would get hit every time, but we put ourselves in a position where we're willing to have somebody attack us. I think that's really the link for me. And in talking about, well, what's its link to Aikido? Well, as you say, Aikido and daily life for me are synonymous. So I think exploring how what we does on the mat might help us off the mat and what the benefits of that are is the interesting part of this topic. So we make ourselves open to receive a technique. And if we get in the way of that technique, it's not really Aikido. It's about blocking or running away, avoidance, really. And to me, you never end up with a very satisfactory Aikido technique if you adopt any one of those particular ways of going forward. Are people comfortable with that as a statement? So really, we have to learn to fully accept whatever's in front of us at that point in time, be it a sword, a fist, someone grabbing, pushing, whatever it might be. And the best way of dealing it is to receive that attack fully. Yep. And then only really when we fully accept it can we lead it to a better place. And that seems to me quite a good skill to cultivate, to be willing to be hurt in order to find a solution to it. And that, I think, is the link to our off-mat practice. Now, interestingly, when I told my good lady that I was doing this topic tonight, she said, all cook men need to be on this session. So I don't know what she was trying to tell me. But I think it's probably fair to say that blokes in general are not particularly good to fessing up to the problems they've got in life and opening up to help. I'm not saying that's exclusive. I'm sure there are women like that too, but I think men in particular are a bit like that. And this is where I'm going to open this up to the ladies and say, okay, I'd be really interested to hear your experience of this idea of actually how men go about approaching Aikido on the mat and actually how they are off the mat. Is that statement I just made true as far as you're concerned? Linda.
It's an interesting question because it leads right into something I was thinking about, the definition of vulnerability. It's not only open to what's coming at you externally, an attack from someone else, but open more fundamentally underneath that, open to what you're feeling internally. And I know for me, that was a huge thing. I was like not gonna feel stuff when I started Aikido. That was long history of that. But I had to learn, you know, to respond to an attack, to be receptive, you need to be willing to feel it.
Yes.
And I mean, that certainly was an issue with me. I suspect it's one of those more like maybe typically masculine things that you were asking about that could be an issue for a lot of men. Like, you know, well, I'm not going to feel my feelings, or, you know, perceive something coming at me that I don't want to feel. So that level of vulnerability lets us receive fully.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you've opened up. This actually, sometimes for many, many people, if not all people, the worst critic is yourself. You know, so you know, I was playing badminton last night, and I've been playing racket sports and all sports since a small child, and I still get in a rage when I make a mistake. I can't just accept it. I get mad at myself. I'm not mad at anybody else. I'm just mad at myself for making a stupid mistake. It's not particularly helpful or profitable to anybody, but that is my reaction. So, you know, I am my own worst critic. And it can ruin my evening if I keep making too many mistakes. So it's interesting. Yeah, but being open to recognizing that, I think, is the first way to go some way towards solving the problem.
Yeah, to actually feeling what's going on.
Do you notice a difference between the way men are and the way ladies are? It's always a generalization on the mat, in the way they approach their Aikido.
One thing I've noticed with some men is that I think they've had an expectation instilled in them that they should be physically competent, that like already it should just be a natural thing, that they should know how to fight, they should know how to manage themselves physically. And so a lot of them, I think, feel very intimidated when they first start out. I've worked literally with men who were shaking when they first started training. And it's one of my superpowers as an older woman. If I see one of these guys, new guys, who's a little freaked out at first, about to go bow in with like a male black belt. This was better when I was a white belt. I'd go snag him, you know, hey, train with me, because I'm not scary. So, you know, I could say, okay, oh, I'm working on breathing, let's slow down. And because I've seen them like, oh crap, this is a guy and it's a black belt, you know, and I should be up to this. So I think society puts that expectation on men a lot more than women, and that men probably internalize it.
Okay. Dimitri, what's your experience?
Well, I totally agree with Linda on what she said. I've experienced it in that way because I've had similar experiences. I've had men on the mat who were really extra aggressive for no reason. And I agree with her. It's mostly social, that society puts pressure on them to be in a certain way, to win, I think. And then on the other hand, I've practiced through the years with men that were not at all this way.
Right.
They had a very balanced energy, very balanced yin yang. And so they were not acting out of compulsive behavior rather than conscious behavior. They had worked themselves more, I think, on a more, like unconscious level. They had done more internal work with themselves, and that was obvious. But for me, as I was listening to you describing about vulnerability and the way we face that on the mat, it's just some scenes from everyday life were coming to me. It's just, you cannot separate the two. You cannot separate the two, how one feels on the mat when one is attacked, and how one, well, on the mat, you're more protected, you are in a protected environment. It's a bit more serious when you're not on the mat.
Sure.
Or I'm also thinking of verbal attacks also, not necessarily physical attacks. Yes.
Okay. Can I come back to you on that when we sort of step off the mat and start taking these skills into everyday life? Perhaps you can illustrate exactly what you mean. Judith, can I ask that question of you, and slightly rephrase it? Do you think that when you look at men and women as a generality, there is a difference in the way they go about approaching their practice?
Yes. Men, I should say, often seem more confident, and I don't think they always are more confident, but they believe they have to put on this air of confidence.
Right. So does that hold them back?
Well, yes, because it gets in the way of them learning if they're pretending they already know the stuff. Right.
So that's an important point, isn't it? Because if you're not willing to admit that you don't know stuff, or you're potentially, going to screw up here, you make lots of mistakes, and life becomes tough on the mat and off the mat.
Uh-huh.
Joe, this was your subject in the sense that you were the one that saw something on this and thought it was fascinating. Tell us what you think.
Well, here in Brazil, at least with the two groups that I was practicing, so Brazilians, we hug a lot each other. So in this subject of men being more cautious or not, or just being a kind of afraid to touch women on the mat, we didn't feel that much. But what I remember, we were close to each other. We were kind of very friendly to each other, but I don't remember quite well just any man showing emotions. So I am afraid of this high fall. I am afraid of hurting myself of this technique. I was beaten up in school when I was a kid. I only heard once. My teacher was telling there was a beginner. He stayed only 1 month, I guess, practicing with us. And when somebody come towards him to strike him, he just panicked, and then after the class he told that he was beaten up a lot when he was a kid. But it was only that the other men, just like the night group that I used to practice, it was mostly men, and they never talked about emotions, just like, I am struggling in my work, my boss is pushing me too much, or I broke my arm when I was a kid. Nothing about that. So today I'm very happy because something very good happened. My energy is good. I'm feeling very energetic to practice a lot, or what. We never talked about that. So the practice was much more, okay, bow into the sensei, practice only technique, and nothing relating to how to work with our emotions.
Okay, so the supposition is that that your experiences generally of ladies is that they are open to that they will tell you what's going on with themselves. Is that right?
Yeah, the ladies used to tell more when we gather a bigger group of ladies, because in the beginning it was only me and another woman that she wasn't so frequent the same days that I was practicing. But in our morning group we have more ladies, so our women group, we open up more, but not only the men, they started to talk more when we have just gatherings, breakfast or happy hours or stuff, but never on the mat. Never. It was very rare something happening like that.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think I think first of all, it's a lack of opportunity for you to bring your stuff to the mat, you know, bring your questions, your fears, your doubts. What is going on with my body? Why do I do like this, or why do I do like this when somebody approaches me? What happens to me when I am afraid of something? When I don't trust in somebody else's, what's happening? If I have already injured myself in any situation, could be on the mat or in other physical activities. So I think it's a huge lack of opportunity that people don't open up themselves on the practice and stay in the physical part. I don't know.
So are you saying that to get the best out of your training on the mat, it's really important to be totally authentic to yourself and to the people in front of you?
Yeah.
Yep. And so if you're not totally authentic, do you think it's fair to say that maybe somehow you miss some of the learning because you're too busy putting this shield up and pretending that everything's fine? I don't have the answer. I'm just asking the question.
Actually, I have one time that I wasn't showing myself too much, that I was struggling a lot with the separation and stuff. And then I remember I went to the mat, just say, oh my God, I need to fall and get up 1,000 times. So I'm gonna to recover. And I didn't tell anybody about that, but I really felt my body very weak. And I wasn't eating that well. So it was a self-aggression that I was doing to myself, putting myself in a risk on the mat that day. Nobody knew about that. My senseis, nobody knew about what was going on with me. So nobody could take care of me because I wasn't taking care of myself. So how can I, for me, it's completely different right now. I need to bring, what is my subject today, so we can approach the better way to take care of each other. Yeah, I think just like O-sensei said, true victory is victory over ourselves. And thinking about Aikido as a self-defense, for me, I'm self-defending from my own attacks. So
yeah, and it starts there, doesn't it? It starts and ends there, really. Yeah, I totally agree. So guys, you've heard all of this. What do you think? Hugh?
I'd say two quick things, Quentin. One is when you started talking about the subject, it was cast in a sort of physical sense. And I think as this conversation rolls on, there's a clear, very strong mental element to it. So there's and you could call that an internal and an external facet. In response to Joanna's comment, I mean, I do think it depends very much on, it's not all on the individual to hold back or not to hold back. It's, does the environment that they're in a particular dojo allow them or make it easy for them to project these opinions or feelings? And in my experience, certainly in this country, in the UK, that is not very often the case, especially with male leadership at the front of the mat.
Do you want to expand on that a bit? Talk a bit more about the...
No, not really. I mean, I think, hopefully be a little provocative and see what other people say as well. But you know, I think, you know, we're still. I think, sorry, as Judith was describing, or Linda, the difference in the male mental attitude of you know, feeling they have to win, and then ego gets in the way and everything else. And if that is allowed to instill itself in you through to the time when you're on the front of the mat, it's not going to give a lot of opportunity for others to feel that the environment is right for them to open up in that way.
Okay, so I'm going to push you a little bit and say, okay, so it's more often the case, especially in the UK, less so in California, that it's a bloke who's leading the dojo.
Correct.
And do you think that male leadership kind of requires them to never admit that anything's going wrong, and whatever they're saying is the right way. They can't admit that things might not be quite as they should be, and they're not very good at taking advice. Is that?
Well, partly, but I think it's also, you know, can they see a different person's point of view?
Yeah.
In fact, to turn it completely around, as Joanna was saying, nobody knew what her situation was. We don't know what another person's situation is in life.
No.
Over a long period of time or on any given day.
True.
And so you need a little bit of empathy to come alongside them and just sort of see life from their perspective, whatever the situation.
I'm going to come back to you, Joe, in a second, but it seems to me that you know, that's where the vulnerability becomes apparent. If you're not open to somebody questioning the way you're taking things forward, then that's not showing great, you know, admitting that you could have it wrong. That doesn't show great leadership to me, and I do think that's where you have to be vulnerable to be a good leader. Actually, Joe.
I mean, we're very lucky in Cambridge, particularly because we do have two great sort of senior women Aikidokas. So we're a bit different to any other dojos. That's good.
Yeah, Joe, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just one quick word, just explaining more. It's not that, I think it's cultural. Just like in Brazil, it's not only on the dojos, but places ruled by men. It's worldwide like that. But I think it's opening this vulnerability to behavior on both ways. I always could ask my teachers or my group to say, I'm not feeling good today, can you help me? So in my side, I never talked to them. I was always hugging them in the beginning and in the end of the practice, but not talking about my private life. So of course I can choose how to introduce that. Yeah. And of course I think they will be open. They might not give the I don't know if they would give the proper response or the proper caring, but at least someone must take the first step and open up just to open the situations. Otherwise, both sides will be closed. I will be closed on my side, not showing my emotions, and the others just don't know how to deal with that, because you never know. That I don't know future steps.
I think that actually is that is part of the Dojo Cho's role, to encourage that sort of conversation, to show that they can, you know, that they are having a tough time. I know that when I lost my dad, you know, talking about that in the dojo was one of the best experiences because people were so supportive. You know, they helped me get through that. And if I pretended, you know, everything was hunky-dory, I think it would have taken much longer to recover from that experience. But me showing that I'm not trying to big me up at all. I'm just saying that I think if you're willing to do that kind of thing, people respond in kind. And when they're having a tough time, they tend to tell you. Yeah. Adrian, I'm interested to know what you have to think on all of this.
I'm all over the place. I mean, there's so many things, so many doors open here that I'm confused. I'm like in a labyrinth now. I don't know how to start, because it was said, relationship with yourself, being vulnerable to yourself, the relationship with others, being vulnerable to others. Is the vulnerability a good thing, a bad thing? I think it doesn't matter. You can use it as a opportunity. I was saying, what's the opposite of vulnerability? Is it being strong or being arrogant, or something else? I think of myself, I have wide shoulders. I'm well built in my shoulders, but my wrists are very, very small and fingers. So people seeing me, they think I'm probably strong or whatever, and they take it on me. And then if they do a Nikki on me, I'm ouch, you know, it hurts. So it's me in the same me is vulnerable and probably strong or arrogant or whatever. So we are a mixture, I think, that how we perceive ourselves and then how others perceive us. Vulnerability on the mat. I don't know, if it depends on the group. If you open up or not, if you feel safe, because it is the fear. It is that fear that if you open up, that can come back against you in a way or another. So that's why people don't talk about these things. On the mat, if you feel that the group is sort of safe to open up, you probably would do that with no problem. However, if you think of the traditional way, if you think about the dojo cho, who's the leader, now, is it okay to show vulnerability? Not because you don't show your humor, no, but maybe it's better for you to listen to others, to know your group, your people's problems, you to help them to go through that, or is it okay you to have an exchange, an equal exchange, to put them on them? Would that be a burden for them? It depends on the quality of the group again, and individuals there. Or you might choose some people to talk to, but not to all. Or you do it with all. I don't know. I think there are all options there. It's a good thing to reflect and what works for you or for me, or might be different. And it's important, yes, to anyway talk to, if not to you in your dojo, you have your sensei. Your sensei should be spiritual, or someone who cares about you and you can talk to. It's not just a technical advisor. You should have someone, if not your sensei, someone who's maybe a senpai, someone or even a colleague that So still, I think we need to open up in a way or another. Now, to who? That's another question. Or so to how many? Just few thoughts.
Lots of good thoughts in there. I think there are occasions where showing you're vulnerable, and that you're feeling a little bit weak is really a dangerous way to go. So opening up to the wrong people could be really harmful. So you're absolutely right. You can only be vulnerable in an environment where you feel it's supportive. But if you pretend you haven't got a weakness, or you're not willing to admit you've got a weakness, then how do you expect to move from that position? So I was part of an association where it was the traditional structure. The one at the top was the god, everybody else had to do what he said. Now, he was fantastic on the mat, but his ability to organize a marketing, say, or make the best of a website, absolutely useless. And was he prepared to let people take control of those things and do it properly? No, he wasn't. So guess what? Those were weaknesses within that group. The group could have been stronger had he admitted that in some areas, actually, there were many people in his organization who knew way more than he did. So, and he might have learned something about those things along the way because people would have been prepared to show him. And he then wouldn't have been so weak in those areas. So, and I think that goes in all aspects, be it technical or mental or emotional. If you don't eventually admit, I can't do this thing, how do you expect to progress from that position? So at some point, I think you have to open up and be vulnerable.
Sorry, I want to say that it's like, the example of little monkey and the gorilla. Someone can come across a gorilla, but actually is a little monkey down there that he's scared or she's scared. And yes, that's why you see probably macho type, men and all that. And like you said, maybe they are not feeling very confident or whatever, and they get tough on the mat physically or things they say. The other thing I remember you've done some session, maybe more. I don't know. Sorry, I missed lots of them, but it was on empathy. Yeah. And then the question at the time was to me, empathy is a skill. Empathy is something that I studied in university for 2 years, I think, and it's a skill that we practice in social care, in psychologists and all that. It's quite complex, and for professionals, probably doesn't matter if you're male or female. But I wonder if males are, by denying, their vulnerability, they're not empathetic. They can't have that sort of dual communication. They can listen, but they can't reflect. They can't back. They can't reflect back. I don't know if they can reflect on themselves as well. So that's a question. Are males in Aikido maybe less empathetic?
It's a really good question. And I'm going to open it up to others to come up with their answers. My gut reaction is, if you put up a wall in front of other people, it not only protects you or harms you in some ways, it keeps you isolated from yourself. It also keeps you isolated from others. So I think you might have hit onto a really important observation there. Others chime in, please. Steve?
I think if you don't open up enough or attempt to open, you're not going to be able to move.
You get stuck in a position, don't you?
And that then means that the vulnerable situation just stays where it is. It doesn't happen to deal with. So the only way really is to invite that person on or off the mat to bring, so you can counsel each other and discuss things from that way. You can't do it in the middle of class in the same way, but just to invite that to happen, then generally I think it will work.
No, I agree, Steve. I think unless you can open up, then it restricts your growth, if not entirely, at least in part. Other thoughts, Andrew? You've been very silent.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's been my experience over the years in the number of different dojo organizations that I've been involved with. Aikido has attracted more people that you would loosely say were in the vulnerable character, sort of category. I mean, I've even had people say to me that they like it here. They tried karate or something else, and they were they didn't find that useful at all. So we do tend to attract people who might be vulnerable in some aspects, so we must be doing something right. And the other side of it, I was going to say, I was watching people practicing last night, and so going back to the male-female side of it, so women on the whole, as a generalization, haven't got the same physical strength as men, so they can't use their physical strength to power on techniques. But I was watching two guys sort of last night practice, and boy, it was whereas the women, because they haven't got that, they have to rely on technique and actually do it properly.
So they have to cultivate their sensitivity, whereas guys perhaps ignore that for a while.
Yes, they can get away with doing a technique by powering it on rather than by actually using the technique itself. Okay, so the words I'm hearing myself say that are sparking my thoughts is the fact that Aikido for me is all about developing your sensitivity. The further I get into the journey, the more observant I become of the tiny things, and it's the tiny things that make a lot of difference. And I think guys often fall behind ladies in terms of, they're not as good in the early years because they rely on their strength and speed and athleticism, and they can get away with a lot, whereas, as you say, ladies can't. What do you think, ladies? But there's a lot of thinking going on. I'm not hearing any words. Linda.
I was typing, but I'll just say it. Well, two things on that front. It doesn't stop me, at least, from still trying to muscle my way through techniques. I'm just strong enough to think I might be able to get away with it. And something that really surprised me, complete moment when I first started training, was how much stronger men were. Some of the guys I trained with were ridiculous, and not because they were really trying, just they were a heck of a lot stronger. And when you don't have an experience normally in real life to go put your hands on people and experience that. But something else I wanted to add to the earlier discussion was about the group of people who show up in Aikido. A lot of the what we were talking about my idea that men are expected to be physically competent, that they feel like they, you know, maybe should have worked out in the weight room in high school or whatever it is that they're told they ought to know already, can keep an awful lot of them from ever walking in the dojo door the first time. So the people who we're dealing with are the ones who got past that barrier. They're willing to at least give it a try, to admit that this is either so arrogant that this is something they can do and it won't be a problem, or that there's something they don't know and they could use coaching and they're willing to practice it. But I think there's a whole lot who never make it past that, like, oh, I'll look stupid and I'll be embarrassed and I'm not up to it kind of barrier. And I suspect that affects men more because women don't have that same expectation put on us that we should already know all this stuff.
It's interesting. I think my experience is that every person who comes into the dojo for the first time feels really awkward. Now, even in the warm-up exercise, they're kind of scratching their head and I don't know what's going on, and they feel stupid because they can't.
Absolutely. But a lot of them never get onto the mat. I mean, that's that fear of feeling stupid and being vulnerable keeps them from even attempting it.
Okay.
Because they know they're going to experience that.
My mind works in strange ways, Linda. And when you're talking about working with these guys that are so strong, I'm thinking, but you work with horses a lot, and it's the same thing. Horses are way, way stronger than them, but you develop a sensitivity to guide them and get what you need out of them to make that a pleasurable working experience. I wonder if some of those skills came out when you're working with these monsters on the mat.
Possibly, probably. Yeah, especially in the same putting them at ease so they don't feel like they have to be defensive.
Right. Other ladies, thoughts? Gonna weigh in, Demetra? Joe, can be you. I don't mind.
Okay. Now this thing about men being stronger than women, I think it's all of us as human beings, we are taught from 1,000 years, I don't know how many years, to be strong, and our strongest comes from our muscle power. So it's just like, for me, I'm a short woman practicing. Most of the men in the dojo were bigger than me, were stronger than me. So it was between them. It is so difficult to get rid of this muscle power. And when I practice with them, it's kind of really finding that empty or that gap that I really, just to bring them down. It wasn't about my muscle force. It was only about just finding the opening and the way that I could bring them to me instead of pushing or pulling. So I think both of us as human beings, we tend to use our muscle force, and getting rid of that. It's kind of, and also when I train with somebody which could be a beginner or could be weaker muscularly than me, it was kind of, okay, I'm not doing that much force that I would do with a huge guy that I was practicing. So this, I don't know, it's kind of a struggle thing that men usually with me, that I was weaker than them, they were still using their muscular force because it's so automatic. It's part of our behavior. Just how do we lift a box? How do we lift a luggage on the airport, pick up from the airport and put it on our trunk? It's too much inside of us for us to get just cleaning ourselves with that. So and it is connected to power. So
there's something in that. It does make me ask the question, what's the definition of strength here? Adrian.
Well, say not necessarily the strength, but my ego suffered the most when I met smaller people and smaller ladies. Yeah. So when I was especially young, and I was like, say, maybe athletic, whatever, and I couldn't see where that sensei or more experienced, they were more experienced. So I would say it's not the strength, maybe the experience, well, regardless the gender, because you can be male or female, but in time, let's say male, you start to soften in time. Yeah, as you get older, you realize that, okay, there was a time when I was physical and all that. Now I'm like that. Or you probably chose the way, because Aikido is quite a wide path. So some people would do maybe Ki Aikido, and the other ones would do, the other end would be the very hard Aikido. Yeah. So maybe if you were on the soft path and you stay soft, you can go all the way. If you're on the hard path, it's not all the path side of the side of the power is hard. Sorry. At some point, you have to get soft. You have to move. You can't stay there because you get old. You can't do the same as you were young. So regardless, at some point, you become a woman or a woman becomes a man. It doesn't matter. You get soft. You can be a woman and strong like a man when you're young. So I met that as well, especially in maybe I'm a bit biased, but because I'm coming from Eastern Europe, I met females, very big females and very strong, and they would get me all over the place. But I'm pretty sure they also soften over time.
Yeah, I've got a couple of observations.
It doesn't matter.
There. So I've often found, Dimitri, I'll come back straight to you after this, that often it's when other martial arts show up on your mat, it's because they can no longer do the martial art they were doing because they got beaten up there and damaged everything, and they think they can do Aikido because it's a softer art. And the second thing is that I started in Ki Aikido and kind of came out of the closet after 17 years and discovered this whole world of Aikido and networked quite strongly then and met all sorts of others. And my experience has been that we were the novelty, my brother and I. You know, they looked at what we did, which was so different to what they did, that they wanted to capture some of what we had. And as they've got older, they definitely needed to, because we all, our physical powers wane. But we all know that the best teachers are the tiny little people who in their 70s, who don't move at all, but they flick you over with their finger because they've learned what it takes, and it's not physical strength. It was Dimitri, wasn't it? Yeah. Come in, chime in.
Yes. What I wanted to add on this is that through my experience in Aikido dojos, but also I find this similarity with Tai Chi that I've been teaching. In male students, one of the common things that I've noticed is that they have to unlearn not to use their muscle power. I think this is one of the main first obstacles that men practitioners have. They have to unlearn what they've been practicing almost their whole life, depending on their age, not to use their muscle power. And I've seen that for some of them, it takes a few months. For some of them, it can take years. And then, because we all know in Aikido that when we talk about power, we mean internal power. Okay, muscle power can be lost in a few years, or can be lost with age, but internal power cannot be lost. It can even grow stronger with age. And I always have in my mind a couple of instances in Aikido dojo that I'll never forget, that were just so revealing about, and so they were proving what true Aikido is. I remember twice in different time periods when I really had in front of me, doing some training, I had in front of me some really big guy, both times, different people, but the second time was 130 kilos, really huge, really big. And it was with Yanni Sensei, and it was just demonstrating. There was actually the second guy, he was coming, they were invited from a Shotokan, karate Shotokan group. So our sensei was trying to show to them some Aikido techniques and how that were not relying on muscle power, and somehow persuade them that Aikido really works. So when we split in couples, I just happened to have this really huge guy in front of me. And the first thing is that I felt fear inside me, and inside me, I felt panic. Oh my God, he's so huge. And then the next thing I remember is I just did the technique, and inside me, I knew I was not persuaded that it was going to work on him. And I was so surprised when it really worked. When it really worked, and he in the beginning, he was really astonished, and he said, "Oh, what did you do? What did you do?" And I said to him, "Nothing." I said to him, "Nothing." He said, "What did you do? What did you do?" Because he was pushed away. And then I couldn't believe it. It just came out of emptiness, you know, it really worked, but out of emptiness. I didn't even believe that it would work. So there were a couple of instances in Aikido with big guys that it was a real proof to me with my body, with my own body, to experience that when you work with your energy and you do the technique properly, the size of the other person does not matter. It works. And
I have to say that's a kind of the joy of Aikido for me. And almost every week, you know, when I'm playing with people, you know, I'm amazed at, oh wow, how this works. You know, it's just lovely that you don't have to use physical strength.
Yeah, this is really the most challenging thing, and also inspiring at the same time.
Judith, did you want to chime in at all? No? Happy? Okay.
Fine, thank you, Quentin.
Okay. So anyone else even got anything that they would like to introduce this conversation at this point in time? Okay. So does Aikido cultivate the ability to show your vulnerability, and does that help off the mat? Linda.
Absolutely. This was one of the things that hit me between the eyes when I first started training. The embodied practice of letting yourself, like I was saying before, like you have to feel to receive a technique, you have to be aware of it. You can't just go, I'm not moving. That practicing physically, that ability to soften and be aware of what's incoming and receive it. We had a whole session on that at a seminar or a class, and it was like the next day, it just struck me that like, oh my God, this is my life. The embodied practice of that vulnerability and receptivity completely like trickled out into the rest of my existence.
Can you don't have to, but can you think of an example of how that kind of practice went into your head, and then when something happened in life, you remembered the lesson on the mat and you applied it in your daily life?
I remember a really weird thing happening. I mean, I was really good at being shut down, which is incidentally what I kind of think of as the ultimate of the opposite of vulnerability, to Adrian's point, is being closed. But something that happened that really surprised me, that was completely out of character for the old me, is I was in a meeting at work, waiting for a meeting to start, and someone walked in, and normally I wouldn't have paid any attention. And without my even realizing it, I just turned to her and I said, "Are you okay? Is everything okay?" And she had just had some tragic thing happen to her, I forget what, and she wasn't really okay. And there was just something that, you know, whereas I would have been just closed, we're going to have a meeting, here's the points we have to cover. Something felt that, something received that, and was like, oh, there's something going on over here. Yeah. So it's like the sensitivity went right up, and I was like watch those words come out of my mouth, and I was like, who said that? Yeah. Yeah. And it wasn't, I didn't even think of it until later, like, oh, right, that's what I've been physically practicing all this time, you know.
I would say that just in my experience that I'm quite good at that, at being very open all the time and picking up that things are not quite right, and having the courage but also sensitivity to say, okay, what's going on with you? Do you need some support? And often you find out, like you did, there is something going on, and the sharing helps. I'm not so sure whether I'm that good at going the other way, admitting when I'm not so happy. Maybe I'm getting better at it. I've got a thing going on at the moment in my family that's been upsetting. And actually it was kind of doing a verbal Aikido session that kicked me into gear to actually say, this is a problem and I need to do something about it. So it wasn't on the mat, but it was just the general principles of Aikido that kicked me into gear and meant that I had to admit this was an issue and I needed to do something. I'm going through that now. There you go. There's my vulnerability bit for the night.
I hope it goes well, and I'm glad you're able to talk about it and experience it, not just.
Well, I think it's really important actually to admit that, look, just because you're a dojo-cho or supposed to be a leader, that life's still tough at times, and you know, you have problems, and like everybody else, you go, you know, we learn, we get down, but the practice means we have to get up and dust ourselves down and move forward, not lie on the ground moaning about it all the time, that we have to move forward, and to show people that we don't mind making mistakes and that we are human and vulnerable, you know. Anyone else got anything to chime in they want to admit to tonight? Joe?
Yes, I'm happy that you're using Aikido with yourself too. I think it's part of, what was your question? If Aikido helps us to be vulnerable? Yes, of course, but it depends on us to use it as this tool, and I'm sure all of us here are. I still struggle a little, and I'm working on that to develop this kind of saying of, oh yeah, that's a self-defense. You use the attacker power to do your movement. I don't remember exactly the translation in English, but those common sayings that a lot of people say, yeah, that's a martial art, so it's a self-defense, and you harmonize with your partner and then you control their attack, or you basically, and mostly you fall 7 times and you get up 8. I think it's that, I don't know, what is that? This could lead to the wrong, not the wrong, but to a not good path. And how can we really bring these principles of Aikido that we can embrace and we can really bring to our daily life, and not just maybe just fall in that risk that we could hurt ourselves. Sure. It's like, okay, I'm suffering right now, I need to fall a lot to learn how to get up. That was my situation at that time. So sure, I could use the Okemis for other things that are much better, much softer, much caring, and anything else. So really use Aikido to be softened to ourselves and to others, and to embrace everything. I think we have a lot of power in this art to use in our favor. So
I would say that the BUrwell Online journey has been all about me trying to point out to people that there's so much more to Aikido training than just what we do on the mat, and you can take it into your daily life and make a huge difference. And we were at this Japanese festival at the weekend, and I was chatting to the Aikido teacher afterwards, and I asked him why he did it. And he'd been a soldier, and he said, well, I'd done all the sort of hard stuff, and I wanted to do something that I knew I could never perfect. I could always get better at. And I thought that was wonderful, because I really think that that encapsulates the Aikido journey, that you'll never get there on the mat or off it. There's always stuff to learn. And whichever path you're practicing harder in, or maybe at the same level, there's still more to learn and to get better at. So we're never the finished article. And when we say we are the finished article, then we're in trouble.
Was that
you know there's a problem?
Was that Gavin?
Yeah.
That was Gavin. Yeah. I mean, so my great friend Brian Tott, who was practicing demonstrating with him, and almost did a completely flawless demonstration, by the way, 81 years old and still going strong. Great example to all of us. He was brilliant. I
bet he'd say, though, it wasn't flawless.
No, of course he wouldn't. He's a very well, he's a very humble man anyway. No, he wouldn't have said that, but it was, I hesitate to use the word almost. It was flawless.
Yeah.
As was your Aikido, Quentin, but with a different spelling.
Thanks so much for that, Hugh. Yeah, okay. Hello, Finn. Nice to see you, or not see you yet. Yeah, so I think, what's other people's thoughts on what I just said about the journey?
It is a journey, and it's a journey that you never get, and you never get there in the end.
Yeah,
you're always learning something.
And I think actually, in some ways, the further you go along, the more you realize how vulnerable you are to mistakes, and what a vast amount there is that you don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Quentin, you probably didn't hear it because you were focused on what you were doing on the stage, but while you guys were doing that, I was rattling away over the microphone to the audience and pointing out the significance of the word compound do. And what I was saying, so we were watching Aikido, Iaido, Kendo. So I basically said to the audience, do is a very good word in Japanese. And it's what we're all trying to do here. And it is this journey of sort of self-improvement, and probably you never reach the end, but it's a common element through all the arts, and not just Budo, but Chado, tea ceremony, and the proper word for Ikebana, which is Kado, so a flower journey, if you like. Path of the flower, yeah.
So, okay, so is there a relationship between Aikido and vulnerability or not? Final thoughts. Okay, that's a yes from Joe. That's a yes from Linda.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Finn, you missed it, but
Absolutely.
I'm sure you would have agreed.
Certainly. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Do you want to, I mean, you've just arrived. I'm sorry you couldn't come early. Do you want to add your 5 penneth on what relationship you see between Aikido and vulnerability, or not, as the case may be?
I suppose my first ignorant thought is it's a practiced resilient vulnerability. So you practice making yourself vulnerable, and practice working out how to cope with that. But the practice is necessarily involves a generous vulnerability.
I think you just summed it up in a sentence there. I think that's exactly what the practice is about. Really, really good. Nice way of expressing it.
Yeah.
Adrian, a final thought from you. We're so happy that you came.
Thank you very much for having me. Don't know really what to say. I mean, for me, I was thinking just now at the end, I was thinking, because it was mentioned the person 80 over 80 years old. I was thinking that we should cultivate, as it was said, the vulnerability by, for instance, taking ukemi, no matter what age you are. So there are too many people are still standing as they get older or higher on the path as a grade, yeah. and they don't take ukemi. And I think that's your vulnerability. You've got to receive as you have to attack, but then from that attack, that top that you're strong or whatever, you go for it, then you have to take it back and go down and get down. Yes, you get up again, but you have to experience that. That's, I think, the vulnerability for me, to go down, up, down, up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot in that. I mean, I know obviously it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or whatever your place is in Aikido, there will be occasions where your body just can no longer do that stuff. You know,
That's
I
true.
had a guy who was practicing into his 80s, and he wasn't particularly agile when he started in his probably mid-70s with me, but he would go down in the early years of his Aikido journey, mid-70s. But as we approached 80s, you kind of had to let him not go down, because he wasn't going to get up again if you did that. And he, you know, that was the way he had to practice. So I think within the confines of what our body can do, you've got a really good point. Yeah, it does create a nice balance in the practice. Linda.
And even if you're not falling and rolling, there are still ways to practice that receptivity, moving with the energy, stepping into it.
Yes.
You know, you don't want to go, oh, okay, I'm not falling.
Yeah.
You could still practice the softness and receptivity.
This is where we need Molly here, really, isn't it? Yeah, because she could tell us probably a thing or two about the fact that she's not rolling anymore, but she does receive the technique. I'm absolutely sure she does. It'd be interesting to hear what she had to say. Yeah. Okay, so I think we probably, I'm very open to any other thoughts or comments before I close this down. I'll just give you a sec to stick your hand up if you want to. Okay. I think it's been a fascinating, Linda, sorry, Demetra. Yeah.
Yeah, I just keep this thought in my mind when you were saying that in Aikido, actually, you never get there. You always keep on growing. You never get there. There's nothing to get there. And to me, it's trivial, but it always feels like, well, it's like the universe always expanding. I mean, you never get there, no borders. It's the same. Like life also has no borders. So yeah. Aikido couldn't be different from life.
Yeah.
You never get there.
Again, the words you're using chime, because you're saying no borders. And of course, Aikido works best when we tear down the borders. And when you have no borders, you create vulnerability, don't you? So we've done a full circle. That's a good place to kind of call it a day, I think. I've really enjoyed the discussion. Thanks for sharing it with me. You've made me think about it a lot. I hope you've been made to think about it a lot. And I am open to topics for future discussions or people to interview. Just let me know your thoughts and I'll see what I can put together.
All right.
I'll finish the recording here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you, Quentin. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.